I feel actually much more nervous than when I first played for Herbert von Karajan. I mean, having an interview with you without any outside help, I feel very intimidated and actually hugely honored, John, really. Because when I first came across your music, that was in 1978, and that was in the Black Forest where I grew up, and it was Star Wars. And I'll never forget the first 10 minutes of the opening and just the music, which, you know, this epic music which carries through the film with all the leitmotifs, and it opened a new dimension. Also on the visual side, but more so for me as a musician on the side of music. And I would have never thought that I would, you know, come that close to you and have the tremendous honor to have that many arrangements you wrote for me.
When you were very young, at that age, or maybe a year or two older, did you ever notice film music? When you went to the theater and you watched the movie, did you hear, did it impress you in some way or no?
Actually, the first time I was really impressed by music in a film theater was by your music.
Really?
Yeah, and I have to say, in the last decades, often I went to a film which the subject didn't necessarily interest me, but I went because I knew you wrote the music. And then I thought, you know, if worse comes to worse, I close my eyes and I'll have fabulous music in it.
It is surprising to me still, because when we made Star Wars and did the music for that time, I think all of us in the production thought, this is a very good film. It will play for 2 or 3 weekends and the children will love it, and then we'll move on to the next film. There didn't seem to be anything quite so extraordinary about it.
And now it moved on to the next generation.
The next generation. There was something profoundly communicative about these semi-mythic ideas that connected with a kind of general memory we have that we share.
But it's the tunes, if you take Princess Leia, for example, or Luke and Leia. You know, these are tunes which touch you so deeply that they just stay with you and you can envision the person. That's the wonderful thing about the way you write music. The music is there without the film, and it is totally and fully complete there as the film without your music isn't. And I think that's the reason why Star Wars, now for the generation of my children, and probably also for their children, at least the original parts, and then the 9 for which you are writing the music, is going to continue to really click with all the leitmotifs, you know, all the characters which have, like Yoda, you know, and then now you also wrote the Yoda, rearranged the Yoda theme for me. So in this project, I think Star Wars takes such a huge space because there are so many distinctively different characters, and your way to kind of describe them is so genuinely strong. And about all the new characters, I mean, take Rey, you know, the first Jedi, female Jedi, and that fabulous theme, which is playful and innocent, but also very strong. And for me, playing it on the violin, I know it must be for you as a composer who has very often envisioned, obviously, different instruments for the role, like the heroic horn, and now suddenly it's the violin, who can also be heroic, I hope, but it's different. And there's a reason why a composer chooses a certain instrument over another. How heart-wrenching and horrible was it for you to take a horn part and make a violin voice out of it?
What I might tell you about. I would go back for a moment. You mentioned Rey a moment ago.
Yeah.
And she is Daisy Ridley. Daisy Ridley is her name. And of course, I love Daisy. I went crazy for when I saw her in Force Awakens. So fresh, so clear, so clean, such a great athlete.
Yeah.
And comedic actress and serious actress and fabulous athletic ability for the action scenes. So when J.J. Abrams called me, he said, "Do you want to do the last film?" I just said to him, "Is Daisy in it?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Okay, I do it."
Yeah.
So that was as exciting, I guess, that when ANNE-SOPHIE Mutter asked me to write some adaptations of film music. It is such an honor for me to have one of the, I say it to you, the greatest violinist that your country has produced probably in 100 years, as far as I know, to be and then you're playing the greatest masterpieces ever written in any century for this instrument, and that you would then deign to play some tunes of me, is pretty much a flattering and great honor to say to you. And the music that, to answer your question about the French horn and the violin, the music, of course, is so very well known to me originally, and then over the years of performing it with orchestras and so. So we have Princess Leia's theme, which is a horn solo. And I mentioned to you yesterday, some of the best horn players we have now are women. So I don't mean to say anything against our female partners in life, but for me, the French horn has always been a masculine representation. Even though the contradiction is, I understand I have it for Leia. But the French horn is a call to battle. It's a call to the hunt, and so on. The shofar to blow, to sing. And the violin, if you could accept the idea, that is, at least in contrast to the horn, is a feminine presentation. So if you can take the idea of Leia out of it and think of it as a horn expression originally, and transpose it up in musical terms up an octave or a twelfth or whatever it has to be presented on the violin, it becomes a different emotional experience. It's not the same thing. And it's true of this whole project that I was taking things that I know for years who were set in a certain way and translate it and transpose it into an idiom for the violin. Hopefully violinistic.
Very.
You know, sometimes you try to make something like Far and Away, which is all orchestra, trumpets and this and that, and to make it friendly for a violin.
And then you turn it into actually a very virtuosic piece.
I hope so.
You know, it's extremely violinistic, as is the duel from Tintin. You know, it's another actually almost Paganini-esque excursion into the world of firecrackers and also Hedwig. You know, that iconic theme. How do you? I've read that you don't look at the script before writing, but rather at a raw cut. Is that correct of the film?
Well, you know, yes, that's correct.
So how do you see an owl and then you come up with this theme? That's really astounding.
Well, that's a little different story, which I'll tell you. But the general response to that is that I would rather not read a script or a book if it's that before I see the movie, because anybody who's ever had the experience, we read a book, we visualize as we read it, we cast it, we know what the characters look like, and so on and so forth. And then you go in this little room here, we look at on the screen, and at that, well, that's not what that person looked like to me, or it's the wrong something that, you know. And so if you go in with no expectations and the other thing is no knowledge of what the action is, the action proceeds, and you are surprised at a certain point because you didn't know that. If you read it before, the surprise is not the same. And so
you have no genuine reaction as the viewer would have.
As the viewer would have, and for a composer, if I can remember, I put it this way, my virginal response to the very first response of that is the most treasured thing I can keep as I go back to write the music. So that is that reason for doing it. But Hedwig's theme, Harry Potter, I was before all of that. I hadn't read any of the books. And Warner Brothers asked me to score the film, the first film. And I said yes. And I knew what it was. I knew what the books were. And they called me a month before to score the film. And they said, we want to do a program, advertising reel for Harry Potter.
So a real owl?
Would you write nothing about an owl? It just was Harry Potter. And I said, yes, 2 or 3 minutes, whatever, for television promotion. So I wrote this little piece, really not knowing if it would even be used in the film. And we recorded it for this promotional thing. And the producers all said, that should be the theme for the film. It should be the Hedwig's theme when he flies and so on. I said, well, that's fine.
I was amazed yesterday at our 6-hour-long rehearsal of all these arrangements, how detailed you also go into things like bowings. Because that I have rarely seen in a composer taking such care for basically also violinistic details, and which made, I thought, I'm a reasonably okay violinist, but I mean the knowledge you brought to that has taught me a lot. I was totally
I think it's only from
inspired.
It's only from conducting, I think, that part of it, Anne-Sophie, is trying to get the orchestra to
But
do
it
it.
makes a huge difference. And so I'm very grateful that what I'm extremely interested in is understanding how you get the feel, the understanding of all these different cultural backgrounds, like geisha, for example.
So when Memoirs of a Geisha came along, that is a book I read. I love the book.
Me too. Yeah.
And I felt very prepared to do that without, I had to have the services of some great Japanese players.
Yeah.
And they came. And particularly shakuhachi player, I cannot give you his name, he's left us now, but he was wonderful in the sense that he had been at Tanglewood, which is an American school of music, where he studied clarinet. So he was a fine clarinetist, even though he played shakuhachi. So I could write for him, and he could make it sound Japanese, something that I already written in our system of notation, which is not there.
I find it fascinating how you can really translate it to the cello and obviously also to the violin, the theme of Sarui, with also an almost still vibrato to give this kind of in the sound. I mean, all I can try is to follow.
But it's beautiful on the violin.
What has to be
I don't think the Japanese characteristic of it is less part of the painted picture of what you do with it. It becomes a violin piece.
Yes, I think that actually suits
really
the violin
does.
very well. Yeah.
And other experiences I've had, I mean, it's so marvelous, Anne-Sophie. Like Schindler's List, people say, well, why do you know Jewish music? How did that come?
Yeah.
And of course, except for one, almost all of my teachers were Jewish.
Yeah.
So it was not hard for me to absorb the modalities.
Yes.
But I was a conductor and music director for the film of Night Fiddler on the Roof 50 years ago.
Yeah.
And at that time, I was invited to go over to Israel to the university at Jerusalem, and they allowed me to go into the library to play tapes of shtetl recordings from that part of Poland and so on, that were very early, made even in late 1920s, and some early Yiddish language films.
Yes.
And I don't know exactly how much I learned that I didn't already know about the modalities of that geographic and cultural thing, but it gave me such an inspiration, particularly to write the cadenza and variation for Isaac Stern, who was your predecessor in many ways.
Yeah. So another very unique tune is Cinderella, from Cinderella Liberty.
Oh.
Yeah. Can you tell us more about that song?
I'll tell you about it, but I when you played it,
it's this jazzy kind of improvisando, which is just a dream.
I couldn't get over how you play it. It was really something so beautiful, and such a surprise to me. Because it has...
But I listened to Toots, Thielmann's interpretation, and that, of course, helped me to really grasp.
Well, that was the right source,
Yeah.
Well,
and you conducting, of course.
Yes. Well, it was a wonderful film by Mark Rydell, Cinderella Liberty, about the sort of underside of some people's lives,
Yeah.
About a girl who was a prostitute, a very good girl, but she did, and Navy, and one of those kind of stories. And it had a sort of smoky, bar-like atmosphere of the smell of alcohol and all of this thing, that a little bit of a sordid kind of, nothing really bad, but just also very sad.
Worn down by life.
Worn down by life, and
So how did you get to that?
1970s,
atmosphere?
early 70s. And we talked about the atmosphere of the film.
Yeah.
It was a very, very good film too, I think. And all I can tell you about the creation of the theme is to say to you that I think it was an improvisation. I think I sat at the piano and noodled around, played like a jazz thing,
Yes,
and
yeah.
it's something under the hands.
Yeah.
And I thought this can work. So I played it, and it was a hand thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So easy and so
Yeah.
comfortable, and it had a kind of sad,
Yes.
rough life
Yeah.
kind of feeling to it.
Melancholic. And that
It is all
that
of
kind
our-
of composing in an instant, that you are throwing back a theme forward and backward. I've seen that with Andre, improvising and playing in the Blue Note in New York. And I've always felt that jazz is the real thing, that in a way what we do in classical music is great. And, the great masters, Schubert and Beethoven and so on and so forth. And what I'm sometimes trying to do is, because we cannot improvise, and we are not like in the 18 and 1900s, like Mozart did and Beethoven did with their own pieces, improvising the reprise or a cadenza. But what jazz brings to a classical musician, I think, is the use of time and how you, within a bar line, move the time so it is not standing still, but has a kind of insinuendo, musical gesture. And that is something I think I've learned from jazz, or at least also from Andre, the use of time and how the kind of forward leaning, like you have a drummer, he's not running and he's not actually changing the tempo, but there is an energy in there, which sometimes in the interpretation of a classical piece seems to lack. Sometimes I'm sitting there and think, this is rather drab. It's great music, but the inner fire isn't, the machine isn't going. And in jazz, you have this constant kind of being on the move. And so having Cinderella in this wonderful collection is like Sabrina, another great female tune, so to speak.
I would ask your question, ANNE-SOPHIE, that you have played all of the great repertoire, probably most of it, if it's possible, in a lifetime.
A lot, but
in
there's
a
still
lifetime to do.
piles ahead.
And then I would ask you if you think that the violin, which has a preeminent place in musical expression, in all of these idioms or idia, and now we're in a technological age where sound production is becoming something done by computers more than instruments and so on. Do we, that's a terrible question, do we think that the violin will retain its position preeminently 100 years from now?
Oh, I feel very strongly about the violin, and I'm convinced that everything which has to do with human touch, with the subtlety of what fingers on a string and what a hand with the bow, with the stroke of the bow, the angle of the bow, the speed of the bow, the pressure on the bow. I think all what has to do with human touch, which is connected to what we feel, what we want to express. It's like the violin is for me like a voice. Will we have a singing voice in 100 years? Yes, we will. Will we have this kind of extended me in an instrument, and having then the privilege as a musician to look at the score of a composer and feeling by seeing where the composer was speeding up and how he wrestled. Is there something more beautiful than looking at the score of Beethoven, where you can see he actually was like fighting with the paper? That's a trillion times more exciting than looking at the perfectly printed score. I don't feel anything when I see something perfectly printed. I much rather decipher handwriting. So I don't know how your handwriting is when you're writing, John. Are you writing very neatly?
Yes. Everything else I write is a scribble, but the notation is small. That is the best answer to that question I possibly could have had.
This answer took forever.
No. First of all, it is wonderful what you talk about the hands, and it is very optimistic and has great belief in humanity. And then you could say part two of the question: will the audience come along with us in 100 years?
That is a very good question.
That could be part of it. You
Yeah.
know, I think they are also human,
Yeah.
and the ear is also part of the anatomy, and the ear will connect with the fingers
Yes.
in the way that you
Yeah.
describe. So we have to hope that our composers will understand all of this too.
But you were the one who kind of brought the huge orchestras back.
What is wonderful about film
Yeah.
work in general, as you and I have talked, is that the audience is not in millions, it's in billions. It's
Yeah.
just, it's hard to imagine that
Yeah.
something goes out of this room
Yeah.
is disseminated around the world in those kind of numbers. It's all very exciting. We have so many young conductors that are so fabulous.
But there's only one John Williams, and what you write is just extraordinary. And with that, I think this is the message of hope. As long as your music is out there, being listened to by billions of people, hopefully through loudspeakers who will also reproduce the vast dynamical scale in your music.
Music needs more than one life. But you will be playing everything by every composer. How, when, and why did you decide to do something called Across the Stars? Where on earth did this ever come from? How?
I think it all started really in 1978 when your music became a part of my life and a very important part of my life. And it kept on being a part of my life. But of course you are, up there on the Olymp and I'm, kind of wiping the floor. So I came up with the idea of Across the Stars because we met some 8 years ago and you were truly human and there, and I remember when Richard, who is your greatest fan and knows everything. I mean, Richard
your son.
Richard is my son, and he's the greatest John Williams fan who has ever lived in the last 80 years.
Oh.
So you were so gentle and kind, and and Richard held you up for hours talking about this film and that score and so on and so forth. And then Andre, helped very much because you both were, I think, friends from teenage years. And then I kind of dared to ask you if you might write a short concerto piece, which you did, wonderful markings, which were premiered in Tanglewood a few years ago, and then you rewrote it, and I hope that you will conduct it one day.
I would be so happy.
Yeah,
I have to
really
tell everybody the beginning of this. When I met you, I don't know if you remember, you said to me, "Write something for me, even if it's only 10 bars." You remember that?
Yes.
And then it became Christmas time, and at Christmas time, a box of German cookies came, Christmas cookies, to my house with a reminder about the 10 bars.
10 cookies for 10 bars? How about that?
So I said, I have to write 10 bars for this lady of something if I want to eat the cookie. So I wrote, a piece called Markings, which was solo violin. I think it has 150 bars. It's not that much longer.
So more cookies?
More
to be sent? Okay.
So the second Christmas, more cookies came. So I had to write some more.
Yeah. So more cookies,
so
and then,
this repertoire grew and grew in absolute parallel with my waistline. And it had a wonderfully enlarging effect on my body. And knowing you musically, enlarging effect on my heart and on my brain.
And
then my joy in knowing you a little bit more means I have to write more.
Yes.
So this idea of the adaptation, they're not really arrangements, I wouldn't call them, Anne-Sophie, in a way, because all of these motifs that we talk about, associated with characters in the film, Yoda, Darth Vader, whatever, they are short musical phrases. They're probably, for us, our language, 6, 8 bars, maybe 12 bars, sometimes 4 bars, little thing. How do you make 4 bars into 4 minutes?
Into a complete work, which is an ending, beginning and ending.
Outside of the movie.
Yes.
Where the movie will tell me where the middle, where the end is. I don't have any of that for you. so the idea of making the translation between French horn and violin, and the translation between orchestra and violin, and finding, I hope, the right tessitura, the right register on the violin, and the shape for each piece. And so that's the reason
that's
I
another
kept your
masterpiece.
poor lady.
And then on the other hand, I'm really intrigued in the film Munich how you give room to the film without music, and how powerful it is that at the very beginning and then at the ending, the prayer for peace kind of sums it up and brings it to a closure which couldn't be more powerful.
I think one of the things about film scoring is very important is to, and we're assisted always in the directors in this conversation, although not always positively, that the decision where the music is not playing and it's going to be quiet and so on, and to create an expectation perhaps, or reinforce an atmosphere by not playing and so on, is a matter of what I call the 5-letter word, which is taste. To apply that and judiciously and make the correct decisions. We make mistakes, in scenes. Maybe come back months later and say we should have scored it or we shouldn't have scored it. So that's part of in the end, the trick of making good films is one of the things we want to know. As much as these things are knowable.
Was putting Dracula into this array of different personalities. I think Dracula was
it might have been Andre's idea. Because he always said he loved that particular piece. So I thought, fine, it has a kind of a theme that could be violinistic. I think, with a jump of almost an octave and so on. Thing. And the title of it suggests, I don't know if it's the last meeting of Dracula and his lady.
Before they fly off into not sunrise, but rather sunset.
Originally, that was the most erotic scene in the film. It was fabulous. It's still wonderful as you could see it.
Yeah, but very discreet.
It was very discreet. But the actual piece that we play, not the adaptation we have, but the orchestral piece is the original one, which is longer, which included material at the studio, this very studio, Universal, cut out of the film because they thought it was too prurient or salacious or whatever, too erotic to have at that time. Today, this was so many years ago, today they would allow it and they should re-release it because it was so very beautiful. Also erotic, but enchantingly so, if you can say.
But still the theme has this kind of longing, but great elegance to it. I mean, I
also hope it has danger in it.
It does. I have to kind of speed my vibrato up to make it a little more.
But the attraction of danger, which is a spider web that humanity falls into all the time.
So it has to be seductive and dangerous in the right kind of.
The spider will catch
measurement.
us. But you pursue it unrelentingly. And I think, hopefully, in that music, it has some of it. And some of Franklin,
some of the danger, and
some of Frank Langella's sweeping cape.
And the kind of erotic, but still very gentlemanly. And I've always had a sweet spot for Count Dracula. In any case, so that totally fills the gap of after reading the book and having seen. Countless adaptations, but that's the man, you want to be carried away in the cape and fly off.
I think for every woman that's a little bit of that, yes. I'm going to get myself a cape.
Yes. If you want to say more about the theme of Schindler's List, is so...
Well, the only thing I would say to you, ANNE-SOPHIE, is a little bit of history of Schindler's List. The first theme that I wrote was Remembrances, which I thought, I was happy, and I thought that would be the theme of the film. And then, before I met with Stephen, I said, well, maybe I'll try something else. I'll write another theme. The theme that we know as Schindler's. And Stephen came with Kate, and I was working at Tanglewood, Boston Symphony, and I played both the themes for him. and he chose the second one, which is the theme from Schindler's List. So that's the only historical part of it that may be of interest. But I can also say that I'm very, very happy that you're doing Remembrances, because I don't think we have a great record. I'm not sure what we have of that exactly, but to have a very great artist do it, who is a great artist and a great lady together, having any of that music filtered through your mind and your heart, if I can put it that way, is a great honor for me and a privilege for all of us to hear it. So thank you for reviving Remembrances in the way that you were going to do it. I'm thrilled that you will do it.
To leave us with remembering, always remembering, so we will not repeat what has been done in the past in horrors. What a somber note.
No, it's a beautiful
but a necessary note.
No, lovely.
Thank you for your wonderful music, John.
Oh, and thank you for yours. I'm so looking forward to these days.
As Mozart said, the humble servant. More music!
Well, we have recorded now 2 days. And for me, of course, this place is home territory for so many years. And ANNE-SOPHIE, I think, first time for ANNE-SOPHIE to join us here.
Yeah.
And it's been a happy union. Anything I think will be joyous with ANNE-SOPHIE. But this place is a hallowed hall, if you like. I think built in the late 1920s, before they had sound. So they didn't provide for music recording at all. It was just a stage to photograph in, and it became used as a music stage, and it became more or less beloved in the music industry as being one of the better sounding rooms we had in Los Angeles all through the years. So as most people listening or looking at this will know, probably The Wizard of Oz was done here.
Amazing.
And Singing in the Rain and American in Paris and Ben-Hur and on and on and on. Yeah. Okay. And even Star Wars recently. And E.T. and a lot of these things, Indiana Jones and so forth. And so I made a little joke with the orchestra, saying to them that for these recording sessions, they will not be paid. They're going to pay us so they can hear you.
I always think day one of a recording session is always the most difficult, at least for me, and particularly in a repertoire which is so new for me. I mean, I know your music and I love and admire your music for almost all my life, but playing it and knowing that, you know, like when I play Princess Leia and it's, of course, it was originally for horn, and I'm trying to imitate this kind of floating, suspended in the air, beautiful melody. It's a great challenge for me musically. All what we have recorded so far, The Dwell, and then, of course, Dracula. It's such dark music and so passionate and wonderful, and your orchestration is always really sublime. So for me, it's an enormous challenge, a part of being a great joy. And I'm greatly looking forward to Geisha, which is coming up tomorrow, and Hedwig.
Yes.
I'm slightly nervous for Hedwig. All these runs with the celeste together. It's going to be... We need all the help we can get from the great conductor here.
Well, you had a very flattering idea to do all of this for me when you say Across the Stars. I thought, wow, maybe that's a wonderful idea. But the idea and the challenge of transposing music for the French horn, as we've talked about before, is also like if you have a baritone voice sing an aria, and then you transpose it and have a woman's voice sing, it's a very different aria.
Yes.
So you have brought a new life to the pieces, I certainly have to say that, and a new point of view and a new way of hearing them, and a new way of revealing whatever is in them. I mean, some of the things you did on Luke and Leia are so beautiful, and done in such an original way. At the end of Princess Leia, for example, there's a violin solo, which we have played for years. And you and I are listening to it today or tonight, and you truthfully have brought something very original and very fresh to it that any number of great artists will do it a different way. In this case, a great artist we have as our guest. is fantastic. But people say to me, how did this happen? And I say, well, ANNE-SOPHIE is many things. She's a great artist and a great woman and brings honor to her country and is a citizen of the world. But what she is not is a woman you can say no to. So I discovered this, you see, and here we are.
Yes,
and
but the same is true for you. I cannot say no to you either, so
well,
here I am.
So you brought a lot of joy to us and revivified, if I can put it that word, revived the life of many of these pieces. An example, Cinderella Liberty.
Oh,
which
maybe my favorite.
Well, I honestly tell you, ANNE-SOPHIE, when I sent it to you, I thought, ANNE-SOPHIE is a great concert artist, one of the best in everywhere world. But this is like a jazz thing that unless you know the words to the syllables of the notes, you would never possibly understand what it means. Like Billie Holiday.
Yeah.
If you have to know what she's saying to ever understand how she get that note, a note that you never heard of before. And you, as the kids would say, blew me away when you came and played it for me with total comprehension from somebody in the middle of Europe. When I say revive, I mean actually take out of the bottom drawer of things forgotten by me and everybody else. Yeah. So maybe I can also say on this occasion that Andre Previn, our great, we both love so dearly, was probably the only person in the world who remembers the Cinderella Liberty. Oh, he remembered it, of course.
Yeah, he was very fond of it, as well as the Dracula theme. He was the one who
also Dracula
reminded you, I think, of the treasure chests.
So I said to Andre, do you think ANNE-SOPHIE can play Cinderella? And he said to me, she can play anything. So thank you for that, because you have taken it out of the file drawer.
Oh, it's a great pleasure, a great honor. I can't wait for days 3, 4, and 5 to come up. And I'm glad we have time to rehearse and, do revisit the pieces we have done the previous day. It just makes it musically so much more right, I think.
It's become more mature, and the orchestra is having a wonderful time, and I think the more we play, the happier they get.
Yeah, the more relaxed we feel, and the more the music is flowing, and that's what we are aiming for too.
Yeah, so...
Make music. I remember when I was very young and I did the Beethoven Violin Concerto. I think I was 15 or 16. I had never played it with an orchestra, obviously never in front of an audience. And then, one day I'm invited to come to Berlin. And to be honest, I had worked on it with my teacher, obviously, and then with Karian. But that was a recording which was done totally cold. We played it through, and I think we played it a second and third time. That was it. I never performed it. That's the recording. And our recording here also is quite unusual, because we are recording. We are rehearsing and then recording. For you, I think that is just how you work as a composer.
Yeah. This is wonderful. We're playing everything. All of these arrangements or adaptations are entirely new.
Yeah.
So I'm hearing them for the first time, as you are.
Yeah.
Usually the procedure in music is you will learn so much about a piece playing it before an audience. Yep. I always have thinking that music is like three things. It's the composition, the performance, and the audience. You need. Yeah. So they will give you a huge feedback. Yeah. You will know what's too slow and too fast immediately from them.
Yeah.
So we always benefit from experience and from attention to the material that we do.
And the interaction also.
But I have to say, for this process is the excitement of discovery.
Yes.
And also for the orchestra.
Yeah.
Because if we had played them in concert, it would be a very different kind of thing. But always in my mind, I think of this triadic part of what makes music. If you take any one part of the three parts out, there is no music.
Yeah.
Yes, we have an audience, and I hope we have a big one for your recording. But you can stay in California as long as you like. I keep making arrangements for you.
Okay. How about the big violin concerto?
Yeah. Oh,
Once Star Wars is finished,
yeah.
you know.
We're going to do that too. Very good. But you are honoring us with your presence. It's such fun and such
very much.
delight to have you here.
The delight is all mine. Thank you.
Fabulous.